I wasn't invited to my sister's wedding. Dad said, "It's her day, don't ruin it with your dramas." My sister invited everyone to her wedding, except me. Dad called me and said, "It's her special day. Don't ruin it with your dramas." On the wedding day, her new husband humiliated her in front of everyone. Dad called me crying, begging me to help him pay for the chaos. I just said one thing and left him speechless. If you're not yet subscribed to the channel, click the subscription button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our stories. Your support means the world to us. If you find this story interesting, give it a like. I'd also love to know what city you're from. Leave the name of your city in the comments. Now, let's begin the story. The steam from my coffee cup drew lazy spirals into the cool morning air of Guadalajara. It was a quiet Tuesday, one of those days when the silence of my apartmenta non-minimalist space with views of the heart of the Colonia Americana felt like a hard-earned luxury, built brick by brick, sleepless night by sleepless night. I was leaning over the Perota wood table, reviewing the restoration plans for a Porfirian-era mansion, a project I loved for its honesty, for its visible scars. It was then, in the midst of that productive calm, that the first photo appeared on my Instagram feed. It was a post from the wedding planner, white roses, ivory silk tablecloths, and a caption that shone with an almost aggressive optimism, counting down the days until Maite and Gail's big day. At first, an automatic smile, a conditioned reflex, formed on my lips. It was my little sister's wedding, after all. A genuine, fleeting smile that froze and shattered a second later. Below the photo, in the description, was an endless list of tagged names, a who's who of our life. Second cousins who lived in Monterrey, college friends Maite hadn't seen in years, even Mrs. Consuelo, our childhood nanny, whose Instagram profile proudly displayed photos of her grandchildren. I swiped my finger across the screen once, twice, 3 times, my thumb moving with a feverish urgency, searching for my own username at Itzalark. It wasn't there. I felt a cold pang in my stomach. It must be a mistake, I told myself. With the chaos of a wedding, it's normal for things to get missed. But as I tried to convince myself, another photo appeared. This time from my cousin, with a caption about how happy she was to be a bridesmaid for her dearest Maite. And below it, again, the cascade of tags, and again, my absence. The truth was as simple as a stab wound. It wasn't an oversight. Everyone had been invited. Everyone, except me. My heart began to beat with a dull force in my chest, a muffled drum that drowned out the sound of the morning traffic. I dialed my father's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that tone of forced authority he used when he anticipated a problem, when he put on his patriarch armor. "Itzel, is something wrong? I'm about to go into a meeting." "Hi, Dad." "No, nothing serious." My voice sounded more fragile than I intended. "A traitor. I just saw the photos of the wedding preparations for Maite. Everything looks beautiful, really." "Ah, yes. Your mother is going crazy with the final details. She wants everything to be perfect. You know how she is. Perfect. That word." I paused, gathering the courage to ask the question that was burning my throat. "You know, I was thinking, and I don't remember receiving the invitation. With the mail being so bad lately, maybe it got lost." Silence. A dense, heavy silence that stretched long enough to confirm my worst fears. I could hear his breathing on the other end of the line. Finally, he sighed, a sound laden with impatience, the sound of someone whose valuable time I was wasting. "Look, Itzel, it was a complicated decision. The venue has a limited capacity, the costs are high." "Costs? Dad, you know perfectly well I would have happily helped." "You know what? No, it's not about the money," he interrupted, his tone hardening, becoming sharp. "Listen, it's Maite's day. She deserves for everything to be perfect, without tension, without complications." A chill ran down my spine, a cold that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Tensions. I'm a tension. His voice became a sheet of ice, each word designed to cut. Let's be honest, Itzel. You and I both know how you get. You analyze everything, you question everything. Maite is sensitive. She doesn't need that on her day. She needs people who are just there to celebrate, not to judge. It's her day, Maite deserves perfection. Don't ruin it with your dramas, will you? The word echoed in the spacious, silent apartment. Dramas. My dramas. The dramas of asking why my sister could spend without consequences. The dramas of pointing out an injustice. The dramas of having an opinion. He hung up before I could stammer a reply. I stared at the phone, the black screen reflecting my pale, stunned face. It wasn't an oversight, it wasn't a logistical error. It was a deliberate exclusion, a statement of principles. In the family hierarchy, I wasn't a guest of honor, not even a regular guest. I was, at best, an unwanted spectator, and at worst, a structural problem, a risk, a walking drama that needed to be managed from a distance. The frozen smile had melted away, replaced by a bitter grimace. The coffee, which moments before had been my small morning luxury, suddenly tasted like ash. My father's phrase, "Don't ruin it with your dramas," bounced off the walls of my head like a rubber ball in an empty room. I stood up and walked to the large window overlooking Chapultepec Avenue. The view of Guadalajara, with its blooming jacaranda trees and mid-morning bustle, had always given me a sense of peace, of perspective. Today, it only made me feel smaller, more isolated, a stranger in my own city, in my own life. I leaned against the cold glass, and my mind, like a wounded animal seeking its den, fled to the past. It didn't have to go far. It landed with a thud 5 years ago, on a Tuesday afternoon much like this one. I had just received my annual bonus from my architecture firm, a considerable sum of 150,000 pesos, nearly $9,000. I had the real estate development brochure on my desk. It was my dream, tangible proof that I had made it on my own, the down payment for this very apartment. That same night, as I was celebrating alone with a glass of wine and takeout, my phone rang. It was Maite. Her voice was a whirlwind of hysterical sobs and broken words. Itzel, I don't know what to do. My life is ruined. Ruined. She was in Cancun with her friends. It had been a spontaneous trip to heal her heart, after her boyfriend of the moment had left her. It turned out that healing her heart involved booking the presidential suite, renting a yacht, and buying rounds of champagne for the entire beach club. All on the credit card Dad had given her, an extension of his own. The debt had reached an astronomical figure, and the bank, tired of broken promises, was threatening legal action that would splash back onto my father. Dad is going to kill me and disinherit me, she whimpered. You have to help me, please, please. You're so good with these things. These things, responsibilities, consequences, the messy, ugly real world that my parents had always fiercely protected her from. I told her to calm down and that I would talk to Dad. I hung up and dialed his number. Leandro sounded tired, resigned, a performance I had seen too many times. Oh, honey, you know how your sister is. She's impulsive, she doesn't think things through, but she has a heart of gold. It's just that the world is very hard on a soul as free as hers. Dad, it's nearly $9,000. It's the down payment for my apartment. I've worked like crazy for that money. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could picture him perfectly, rubbing his forehead, adopting that tired martyr expression he had perfected over the years. I know, honey, and I'm very proud of you. That's precisely why I know you can handle it. You're stronger than her. She's sensitive, she gets overwhelmed easily. Something like this could destroy her. Besides, you're the older sister. It's your duty to look after her, to protect her. The old script, the same play. And I, like the obedient fool I had always been, accepted my role. The next day, with a lump in my throat, I transferred every last cent of my bonus to my father's account. The dream of my apartment was postponed for another year. That year was hell. To make up for the hole in my finances, I had to take on 2 commercial remodeling projects in addition to my full-time job. It meant sacrificed weekends, nights sleeping over my drafting table, and a diet based on coffee and sandwiches from the corner store. I vividly remember one night of torrential rain, so typical of June in Guadalajara. I was sitting in the small kitchen of my old rented apartment, a place with a perpetual smell of dampness, eating instant soup because I literally couldn't afford anything else. I was too tired to feel self-pity. It was an exhaustion that reached my bones. As I slurped the bland, salty broth, I opened Instagram out of habit, looking for a distraction. And there it was, a photo of Maite, smiling radiantly, her hair blowing in the wind. She was at a trendy restaurant in Polanco, in Mexico City. She was holding a new designer handbag, one that cost at least a month of my rent. The caption, written with star and heart emojis, read, "Because I'm worth it. Healing and glowing self-love, living my best life." I almost choked on my noodles. I felt a wave of something so bitter it burned my throat. It wasn't pure malice on her part. I knew that. It was something worse, something more insidious, an absolute ignorance, a total and complete disconnection from the reality her family had carefully constructed around her. For her, money simply appeared, problems simply resolved themselves, evaporated by magic. There was no tangible connection in her mind between her actions and the consequences that others, mainly me, had to bear. I turned off the phone with an abrupt gesture. That night, I didn't feel rage, but a deep, exhausting weariness. The weariness of being the strong one, the weariness of being the responsible one, the weariness of being the invisible pillar holding up a luxurious roof so others could dance beneath it. The weariness of being the safety net that allowed others to fly without fear of falling, because they knew, with absolute certainty, that I would always be there below to absorb the impact. And the only payment I ever received was the constant reminder that my strength was not a quality to be admired, but a tool to be used, an inexhaustible resource at their complete disposal. The exclusion from the wedding wasn't a new, clean wound, but the cruel reopening of a very old scar, one that throbbed with the dull pain of accumulated indifference. My mind, searching for evidence to justify the rage I felt, jumped to another memory, one that hurt in a different way, quieter and perhaps for that reason, deeper. My graduation with a master's degree in architecture and built heritage, 3 years ago. I had been the first in the family not only to obtain a postgraduate degree but to finish a university career without dramas or delays. I worked and studied at the same time, a juggling act that left me with permanent dark circles and a caffeine addiction. The sleepless nights drawing at my drafting table, the weekends buried in the university library, all culminated on that day. It was, up to that point, the greatest achievement of my life. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon. I invited them all a month in advance at a family dinner. My mother, Jimena, clapped with a somewhat forced enthusiasm. "How wonderful, my dear." "The other architect in the family," she said, conveniently forgetting that I was the only one. My father, Leandro, just grunted, "We'll see how we are for time," before changing the subject to talk about the new car Maite wanted. The day came, a sunny and perfect May day. I put on my cap and gown, feeling a knot of excitement and nerves in my stomach. Despite everything, a childish part of me still held out hope. The hope of seeing them there, that for once, my achievement would be enough to merit their presence. I searched for their faces in the crowd of smiling parents, siblings, and grandparents that filled the university's main hall. My eyes swept the bleachers again and again, looking for my father's face, my mother's smile, the presence, however bored, of my sister. But the 3 seats I had so carefully saved for them remained insultingly empty. When they called my name and I walked up to the stage to receive my diploma with honors, the audience's applause felt distant, as if it were happening in another room. I smiled for the photos. A professional architect's smile, a well-constructed facade, but inside, something structural had broken. I called my mother that night, after a solitary celebration with two of my closest friends. I had to force myself to keep my voice neutral, not to sound like the little girl they hadn't come to see at the spring festival. Did something happen? I didn't see you at the ceremony. Oh, sweetie, what a shame. You have no idea how we feel. Her voice sounded genuinely distressed, and that was the cruelest part, her ability to sound sorry without feeling the slightest responsibility. It's just that your sister, poor thing, woke up with a terrible cold. She had a bit of a fever, and we didn't want to leave her home alone. You know how delicate she gets very scared. A cold. My greatest achievement, the fruit of years of sacrifice, the culmination of my vocation, had been eclipsed by a cold. I said nothing. What could I say? Arguing would only have led to the usual accusation, that I was selfish, insensitive, that I didn't care about my sister's health. Your sister needed you, Itzel, and you're only thinking about your party. I could hear my father's words, even without him saying them. The contrast was brutal, almost violent, 6 months later. Maide's 25th birthday. My parents decided she deserved an unforgettable celebration to make up for her recent heartaches. They rented a beautiful garden in Tlaquepaque, hired a renowned mariachi band, and a catering service that cost a fortune. 2 weeks before, the inevitable call from my father. Itzel, honey, we're a little tight with the expenses for your sister's party. Could you help us out with a part of it? It's very important for her to feel special on her day. I ended up paying for almost half the party, a party I attended and where I had to endure watching my parents look at Maite with an adoration I had never received. She was their work of art, their perfect, delicate creation. I was the administrator, the engineer, the one who made sure the structure was functional and safe, but whose work no one saw or applauded. It was around that time that I began to take refuge in my work in an almost obsessive way. I specialized in the restoration of historic buildings, a field that required patience, precision, and a deep respect for the past. My maternal grandfather, an old-school cabinetmaker from Michoacán, had taught me to love things that told a story, things that didn't pretend to be new. Honest structures never hide their cracks, my dear, he would tell me as he ran his calloused hand over the wood of an antique piece of furniture he was restoring. The cracks are proof that they survived, that they endured the passage of time. Beauty is in the truth, not in perfection. Perhaps that's why my family hurt me so much. It was a dishonest structure, full of hidden cracks under layers of fresh paint and cheap excuses. I was the only one who seemed to see the rot underneath, the only one who understood that a coat of paint doesn't fix a rotten foundation. The night of my graduation, as I was driving back to my apartment, alone, with the diploma rolled up on the passenger seat like a silent passenger, my phone rang. It was my uncle Isidro, my father's younger brother, a rough, man-of-few-words carpenter, the polar opposite of my father. Congratulations, niece, he said, his gruff voice on the other end of the line. There were no questions, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I heard you graduated today. Thanks, uncle, I managed to say, my voice choked with emotion. Your grandfather would be proud. Don't let those bastards make you feel like less. They don't know the treasure they have. He hung up. I didn't need anything more. That 30-second call was a small lifeboat in an ocean of indifference. A raw, honest validation that I clung to with all my might in the years that followed. It was irrefutable proof that I wasn't crazy. Someone else saw it, someone else knew. And sometimes, that's all you need to keep standing. As the memories swirled, bitter and clear, my mind conjured up the only time I had spent more than 5 minutes with Gail, Maite's fiancée. It was at my mother's birthday dinner last year, an event orchestrated to put on a show of family harmony. Gail was exactly the type of man my parents would adore for Maite, tall, with a toothpaste commercial smile, a watch that cost more than my first car, and that aura of unshakable confidence that only men to whom life has never said no possess. He worked in finance or something equally vague and lucrative. He spent most of the dinner talking about his cryptocurrency investments and his ski trips, peppering the conversation with English words that made my father nod with almost servile admiration. At one point after the main course, he turned to me, holding his glass of red wine as if it were a scepter. "Leandro tells me you're an architect, Itzel. That's interesting. Very admirable, the hard work." "It is," I replied, taking a sip of my own wine, using it as a shield. He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. "But tell me the truth, don't you ever regret choosing something so square? You know, so structured, so masculine?" I think of Maite. She's pure art, pure expression. She's ethereal. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. The condescension was so thick you could almost cut it with a knife. The way he pronounced the word masculine was the final thrust. Before I could formulate a cutting reply about how the architecture of Luis Barragan was more ethereal than any of his fiancée's selfies, my father intervened with a loud, false laugh. "Gail is absolutely right. Hit the nail on the head. Maite is our artist, our free spirit. Itzel has always been the practical one, the one with her feet firmly on the ground. We need one of those in the family too, to manage us." Everyone laughed. Even my mother let out a nervous chuckle. Gail winked at me as if we were accomplices in a joke of which I was the punchline. I just took a long sip of my wine, feeling the weight of my family role solidifying before a complete stranger. I wasn't just the strong one or the responsible one, I was the square one, the practical one, the masculine one. The boring administrator, whose sole purpose was to serve as a necessary counterpoint so that Maite's ethereal and impractical art could shine more brightly. Back in the present, in the solitude of my apartment, after the initial shock, I decided to make one last, stupid attempt to find a shred of sanity. I called my mother. Maybe, just maybe, if I spoke to her alone, without the crushing influence of my father, she would understand my pain. Maybe maternal instinct would prevail. She answered in a whisper, as if she were hiding in a closet. "Itzel, is everything all right?" "No, Mom, everything is not all right," I said, my voice trembling despite my efforts. "Dad just told me I'm not invited to the wedding. I need you to tell me the truth." "Why?" There was a long, long sigh on the other end of the line. A sigh I knew very well. It was the sound of surrender, the prelude to an excuse designed to minimize my feelings and maximize my guilt. "Oh, honey, please, don't make things bigger than they are." "Bigger?" "They're excluding me from my own sister's wedding. The most important family event in a decade. How could it be bigger?" "It's just that things have been very tense lately," she stammered. "Your dad is very stressed with work things, and Maite, poor thing, is a bundle of nerves. We just want her day to be peaceful, without any upsets. And my presence is an upset. That's what I am to you. A potential problem." "No, don't say it like that, please. You're hurting me." Her voice took on a tearful tone. "The ultimate tactic. You know that sometimes you and your father clash. You have very strong personalities. We don't want to risk an argument, no matter how small, ruining Maite's day." She couldn't bear it. It was unbelievable. The responsibility, once again, fell on me. It wasn't my father's explosive temper, it wasn't my sister's manufactured fragility. It was my strong personality, my potential to clash, that disqualified me from attending. I was being punished for not being submissive. So the solution is to erase me from the picture. To pretend I don't exist. "Itzel, please, don't be so dramatic." Her voice broke, adopting the victim tone she also wielded so well. "Do it for the peace of the family. Please, just this once. Be the bigger person. Understand." I hung up, not with rage, but with a cold, definitive resignation. The peace of the family. That phrase had been the invisible, gilded cage I had lived in my entire life. A false peace bought with my silence, my money, my sacrifice, and now, my complete and total absence. I realized then, with painful clarity, that my mother was not a captive ally. She was the guardian of the cage, the one who made sure the bars were always firm, whispering words of love, duty, and guilt so that I would never, ever try to escape. The resignation lasted exactly 12 hours. I slept a restless sleep, filled with images of doors closing in my face. The next morning, I woke up with a new sensation that displaced the sadness. It wasn't the hot, explosive rage I sometimes felt. It was something different, something more dangerous, a cold, calm, and lucid anger. The anger of someone who finally understands that patience is not a virtue, but an invitation to continued abuse. I didn't call, didn't send a message to warn them. I showered, put on a black pantsuit professional armor and took my car keys. The drive from my downtown apartment to my parents' house in a quiet subdivision in Zapopan felt like a journey through a time tunnel. But this time, it was a different person driving. The same tree-lined streets, the same immaculate houses, but the feeling of oppression in my chest had been replaced by a glacial determination. I arrived unannounced. My father's car was in the driveway. The front door was open, as always, a false sign of welcome. I walked in and found them in the kitchen, leaning over a table full of flower catalogs and tablecloth samples. My mother, Jimena, turned pale when she saw me, as if she had seen a ghost. My father, Leandro, frowned, his face instantly hardening. "Itzel, what are you doing here?" he said. His tone was not a question, but an accusation. "We need to talk," I said. My voice was surprisingly firm, with no trace of the previous night's tremor. "And this time, you're going to listen to me." Jimena began to wring her hands, her body language a scream of panic. "Now is not a good time, sweetie. We're very busy with the wedding details." "The time is now," I interrupted, but my eyes were fixed on my father. "I want you to tell me, looking me in the face, why you have erased me from my sister's life." Leandro dropped an orchid catalog onto the table with a thud. He crossed his arms, puffing out his chest, adopting his offended patriarch stance. "Erased you? Please, Itzel, don't be so melodramatic. An executive decision was simply made to ensure that the most important day of your sister's life would be happy and peaceful. And my happiness doesn't matter. My feelings count for nothing in this family." He laughed. A short, bitter, dismissive laugh. "Your feelings. It's always about your feelings, isn't it? Always analyzing everything, always finding a problem where there isn't one. Your sister is simple. She just wants to be happy. Why is it so hard for you to understand something so basic? What I don't understand is how the father who taught me about family honor and loyalty can stab me in the back like this." My voice rose, breaking the forced calm of the suburbs, making the glassware in the sideboard vibrate. "Don't you talk to me about honor," he shouted back, his face turning dangerously red. "You know nothing about the pressures a man has to endure, about the sacrifice it takes to keep this family afloat." Sacrifice? I almost spat the word. You want to talk about sacrifice? I have sacrificed my time, my money, my vacations, my dreams for this family. I paid off Maide's credit card debt so you wouldn't have to. I paid for half of her stupid, expensive birthday party. I was the one who put up money for the roof repair while you were buying yourself a new watch. Enough, he roared, slamming his fist on the table. The coffee cups jumped. His loss of control was total. I am sick of your complaints. I don't have the time or the energy for your childishness. Do you have any idea what this wedding has cost me? Not to mention the damn unforeseen expenses that came up. The phrase hung in the air, charged with a strange, vibrant intensity. Unforeseen expenses. The way he said it, with a flash of pure panic in his eyes, alerted me like a fire alarm. It wasn't the normal complaint of a father overwhelmed by wedding costs, it was something more. It was the voice of a cornered man. My mother intervened, rushing toward me, trying to take my arm. Leandro, please, calm down. Itzel, honey, that's enough. You're upsetting everyone. Go home, we'll talk when we're all calmer. But I was no longer listening to her. My mind clung to those two words, unforeseen expenses. I saw how my father avoided my gaze, how his anger transformed into an almost fearful defensiveness. It was a moment of blinding clarity, a crack in the facade that allowed me to see for the first time that I wasn't fighting against an all-powerful tyrant, but against a scared and desperate man. And I didn't know why, but I was determined to find out. I gently pulled away from my mother's grip. You're right. I see that talking is pointless. Enjoy your perfect wedding. I left the house without looking back, the sound of my mother's choked sobs following me to the door. As I drove back to the city, the rage had been completely replaced by a cold, calculating intrigue. My father was hiding something big, and for some reason, Maite's perfect wedding was the lid he was using to contain it. That night, the silence of my apartment didn't feel peaceful, but like a battlefield after a ceasefire. I was exhausted, emotionally drained. I poured myself a glass of wine. Tequila would be too cliché and self-indulgent, and sat on the sofa, looking at the city lights without really seeing them. The confrontation hadn't brought me relief, only more questions. My phone vibrated on the coffee table. I ignored it. It vibrated again, insistently. It was a message from my best friend, Renata. Renata worked as an event coordinator at one of the city's most exclusive hotels, a world of dream weddings and behind-the-scenes nightmare dramas. She was my anchor to reality, the only person who knew the unedited, uncensored version of my family life. I opened the message listlessly, expecting some meme to cheer me up. What I saw was much more potent. Girl, you are not going to believe this. Hotel bar, right now. Below was a photo. It was blurry, taken from a distance with a cell phone, probably from behind a potted palm tree, but unmistakable. Gail, the perfect fiancé, in a dark corner of the bar. He wasn't alone. His arm was around the waist of a stunning blonde woman, his head bent toward hers in a gesture of intimate, shameless familiarity. My first instinct was a wave of protective fury, a conditioned reflex perfected over 34 years. The urge to call Maite, to send her the photo, to warn her about the snake she was about to share her life with. It was the role I had always been assigned, the older sister, the fixer, the one who always intervened to prevent imminent disaster. My finger was hovering over the forward button. My thumb trembled on the screen. I was going to do it. I was going to save her, even if she didn't want me at her wedding. I was going to be the adult, the responsible one, the martyr once more. I was going to swallow my own pain to spare her hers. And then I stopped. As if it were an apparition, my father's voice echoed in my head, mocking and condescending, "Don't ruin it with your dramas." Then my mother's pleading voice, "Be the bigger person. Just this once." I realized, with a clarity that chilled me to the bone, that saving her was exactly what they expected me to do. If the wedding was cancelled because of Gail's infidelity, who would be blamed in everyone's eyes? Me. The bearer of bad news, the party pooper. The focus of the disaster would shift from Gail's betrayal and Maite's naivety to me. Itzel and her sick jealousy. Itzel could never stand to see her sister happy. She probably made it all up to ruin the wedding. I knew the script by heart because I had allowed it to be performed for years. I looked at the photo again. I saw Gail, the cheater. I saw the blonde woman. But most of all, I saw my sister, not as the fragile child my parents insisted she was, but as a 28-year-old woman making her own decisions. If she had chosen to ignore any potential red flags, if she had decided to get engaged and marry this man, it was neither my responsibility nor my right to protect her from the consequences of that choice. To protect her was to incapacitate her. To protect her was to keep her in the bubble. To protect her was to perpetuate the toxic cycle that had kept me trapped for years. With a slow, deliberate movement, as if disarming a bomb, I held down Renata's message and selected delete. The message and the photo vanished. Then I replied to my friend, "Thanks for thinking of me. But this time, it's not my circus, not my monkeys." Renata replied almost instantly with a simple fist bump emoji. She understood. It was the first time in my life I had consciously chosen not to intervene. The first time I had drawn a thick, definitive line in the sand and said, "This far, no further." It felt strange, unnatural, terrifying, like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. But it also felt incredibly, overwhelmingly liberating. It wasn't an act of revenge against Maite, it was an act of self-preservation. For the first time, I was applying my architect's instinct to my own life. If the foundations are rotten, you don't keep building on top of them. You stop, you evaluate, and sometimes, with all the pain in the world, you have to let the structure collapse under its own weight so that one day, you can build something new and solid in its place. The decision not to intervene with Gail's infidelity gave me a strange and intoxicating sense of power. It was the power of inaction, a new concept for someone programmed to act, to solve, to fix. Freed from the mental burden of being my sister's keeper, all my energy focused with laser clarity on the real mystery, the crux of this whole story, my father's words. Unforeseen expenses. As an architect specializing in restoration, my job was to see beyond the surface, to understand the hidden structures, the main beams and buttresses that supported a facade, no matter how beautiful. I decided to apply those same skills to the most complex and dishonest structure I knew, my family. I started that very night. I sat down at my computer, not with the blind rage of a wounded daughter, but with the methodical, cold patience of a forensic investigator. I began with the basics, the public records of the state of Jalisco. They are arid portals, full of legal jargon, but for someone used to reading complex building codes, they were child's play. I entered the address of my parents' house in Zapopan, the house where I grew up, the house whose property tax payments and urgent roof repairs I had helped cover on more than one occasion. What I found chilled my blood and confirmed my suspicions. Just 3 months ago, a new mortgage had been registered on the property, a secondary lien commonly known as a home equity loan. The amount was staggering, precise, and round, 500,000 pesos. Nearly $30,000. It was a figure too large for a simple whim. The wedding was expensive, yes, but my parents were experts at keeping up appearances, at getting discounts and favors. This was different. This felt like the kind of money needed to put out a very big fire. My heart began to beat faster. Why would my parents need nearly $30,000 so urgently, to the point of risking the family home? My next step was more personal, more painful. For years, out of professional habit, I had kept a meticulous record of my finances. I opened my old spreadsheets, the digital files that documented every transfer I had made to them, every peso that had left my account to enter theirs. Support for original mortgage, help with overdue utilities, loan for Dad's car that was never repaid. The list was long and depressing, a constant, silent bleeding over almost a decade. I created a new, encrypted folder on my desktop. I named it Project Family. Inside, I began to organize everything with the precision of a legal file, screenshots of the public records for the new mortgage, copies of my bank statements showing the transfers, even old emails where my mother thanked me profusely for saving them once again. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but my instinct, the same one that told me when a load-bearing wall was about to give way, told me the pieces were there, scattered among numbers and kind words. It was a puzzle, and I felt I was missing the central piece that would connect my money to their new, mysterious debt. The investigation consumed me for the next few days. My nights were no longer for rest, but for diving into digital bureaucracy, learning to navigate government portals and credit records. I wasn't doing anything illegal, I was simply connecting the dots of information that were in plain sight for everyone, but that no one least of all me had ever bothered to look at. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing, not even Renata. This was my project, my structure. It felt exactly like one of my restoration jobs. I was carefully stripping away the layers of old paint and cracked plaster to see the true state of the bricks underneath. And every layer I removed revealed more cracks, more dampness, more structural rot. The secret plan took shape without me consciously deciding on it. It wasn't a plan of attack, it wasn't a plan for revenge. It was, in architectural terms, a structural contingency plan. I was building a file, an archive of the truth. If the structure of my family finally collapsed, as my gut was screaming it would, I was not going to let them blame me for standing underneath it. This time, when the dust settled, I would not be buried in the rubble. I would be standing, with the blueprints in hand, proving that the structural flaws had been there from the beginning, hidden in plain sight. 24 hours to the wedding. My Instagram feed was a whirlwind of manufactured happiness, a perfectly executed marketing campaign. Photos from the rehearsal dinner at a tequila hacienda. Maite, in a bohemian white dress that surely cost a fortune, laughing with her head thrown back as Gail whispered something in her ear. My father, raising a glass of crystal-clear tequila, a wide smile not reaching his eyes. It now looked to me like a grimace of panic. My mother, clapping delicately, her eyes shining with pride or perhaps restrained tears. Every photo was a small, painful, well-lit lie. I closed the app with a sharp movement. The initial rage had transformed into a sort of detached calm, the calm of an observer who knows the climax of the play is inevitable and bloody. I no longer felt excluded, I felt strangely safe, protected by the distance they themselves had imposed. I was in my study, filing the last documents in my project, family, folder, when my phone vibrated. A message from a number I didn't have saved, but which I recognized instantly from the profile picture, my uncle Isidro, standing next to a huge slab of mesquite wood. Be careful with your father, niece. Things are not what they seem. I read the message twice. I didn't reply. It wasn't necessary. His warning told me nothing I didn't already suspect, but it was an external confirmation, a voice of reason in the midst of the madness. It was the validation I needed to know I wasn't imagining things, that my instincts weren't failing me. My father wasn't just being an old-fashioned, selfish patriarch, he was desperate. And a desperate man is capable of anything. I stepped out onto the balcony. The Guadalajara night was vibrant, filled with the murmur of the city, the distant laughter and music escaping from the bars on Chapultepec. In the distance, the lights of the cathedral shone like a beacon in the darkness. I thought of Maite. Did she know anything about our father's desperation? Probably not. Her greatest talent had always been selective ignorance, a skill for not seeing what she didn't want to see. She lived in the finished, furnished building, never asking about the unstable foundations on which her comfortable life rested. I thought of my mother, probably at home, adjusting the final details of Maite's veil, smoothing out imaginary wrinkles in the fabric, as if with that gesture she could smooth out the deep wrinkles of her own worries. And I thought of my father. Was he celebrating, toasting to the future of his favorite daughter? Or was he in his office, alone, counting the hours, praying that his house of cards, built with my sacrifices and his lies, would stand for at least one more day? I went back inside and closed the sliding balcony door, shutting out the city's noise. I turned off my computer. The project, family, folder was complete, a heavy, dense file of the truth. I didn't know if I would ever have to use it, but having it gave me a strange sense of security, like having a fire extinguisher in a house with faulty wiring. It was my insurance policy against the narrative they would undoubtedly try to build after the collapse, the jealous sister, the problem child, the party pooper. I poured myself a glass of water and sat in the darkness, on my designer sofa, in my apartment paid for by my own hard work. Tomorrow, my sister would get married. Tomorrow, my family would celebrate its greatest triumph, the union of their perfect daughter with the perfect man at the perfect wedding. Tomorrow, everyone would play their part in the great family play. And I, for the first time in my life, would have a front row seat not as part of the cast, nor as part of the audience, but as the only person in the entire theater who had read the full script and knew with absolute certainty that the third act was a tragedy. And for some strange reason, that thought no longer scared me at all. I felt ready. If you're enjoying this story and feel the tension rising, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and leave me a comment telling me what city you're listening from. Every comment helps this story reach more people. Thank you so much for your support. Let's continue. The wedding day arrived with a gray, leaden sky, as if Guadalajara were holding its breath, anticipating the storm. I decided to treat it like any other Saturday, an act of silent rebellion. I got up early, put on my oldest workout clothes, and went for a run along the Via Recreativa. The steady rhythm of my feet against the pavement, the fresh air in my lungs, helped to calm the buzz of anxiety in my stomach. As I ran among families on bikes and couples walking their dogs, I forced myself to focus on the sounds of the waking city, the bells of the Expiatorio church, the sharp whistle of the sweet potato vendor, the laughter of children. A whole world existed outside my family's drama, and I clung to that idea. I spent the rest of the morning and midday in a state of deliberate, peaceful ignorance. I turned off all notifications on my phone and put it in a drawer. I put on classical music, the orderly complexity of Bach, and immersed myself in work, making corrections on some blueprints with almost feverish concentration. It was my way of building a wall, a fortress of logic and straight lines between my reality and theirs. The self-imposed peace was shattered at exactly 5:15 p.m. I was taking a break with a cup of tea in hand when I took the phone out of the drawer. The screen was lit up like a short-circuiting Christmas tree. 34 missed calls. 58 WhatsApp messages. Notifications from Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Cousins, aunts, old high school friends. Then Renata's call came through. The only one I answered. Itzel. Her voice was strained, urgent, as if she were running. Girl, you have to see this. No, wait, don't look. Oh, I don't know what to tell you. It's a total disaster. Renata, breathe. What's happening? The wedding. Maide's wedding. It's everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, it's already on the news sites. Search the hashtag. I hung up and, with a knot of ice in my stomach, I opened Twitter. I didn't have to search long. The hashtag GDL Wedding Hell was trending #1, not just in the city, but across all of Mexico. The first video I saw left me breathless, airless. It was recorded by one of the guests. The camera was shaking violently, but the image was terrifyingly clear. Maite and Gail were in the middle of the dance floor during what looked like their first dance as husband and wife. He, in his impeccable groom suit, was saying something in her ear. Maite's smile faltered, transforming into a grimace of disbelief and pain. She tried to pull away, but he gripped her arm tightly. She struggled. Her face was a mask of panic. And then the act that would define everything happened. In front of 200 stunned guests, in front of my petrified parents, in front of the whole world via hundreds of cell phones, Gail, the charming, perfect groom, grabbed Maite by the hair and brutally yanked her backward, throwing her to the floor. There was a collective gasp, a choked sound of horror. The music screeched to a halt. Maite screamed, a high-pitched sound of terror and humiliation that pierced my ears. The video cut off, but it was more than enough. I clicked on another link, and then another. Photos, dozens of them, from every angle. My mother, her face contorted, trying to get between them. My father, paralyzed, with an expression of impotent horror I had never seen on him. Uncle Isidro and other guests rushing to restrain Gail, who was screaming incoherent insults. Overturned chairs, broken glasses on the floor, the majestic 5-tier wedding cake leaning dangerously, a perfect metaphor for the situation. The perfect wedding had turned into a battlefield, a grotesque reality show. My family's impeccable, carefully constructed facade had cracked and crumbled in real time, broadcast live for the morbid entertainment of thousands of strangers. The comments were a torrent of cruel opinions, memes, and summary judgments. What a shameless bastard. That's jail time. Poor girl, I hope she leaves him. He was probably completely wasted. I always knew those rich people were all for show and appearances. I leaned against the wall, feeling my legs give way. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no joy in their misfortune. I felt a nauseating vertigo, the sensation of watching a train wreck you knew was going to happen, but whose violence and public exposure surpassed any prediction. They had wanted a wedding without my dramas, and the universe, with its twisted and implacable sense of humor, had delivered them the biggest, ugliest, and most public drama of all. And I, the only one who could have predicted it, the only one who had known about the cracks in the structure for years, was miles away, watching the collapse through a screen, exactly where they had wanted me to be, out. My phone rang again, snapping me out of my stupor. This time, the screen showed the name I had been both expecting and dreading, Dad. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3 rings. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave him in the void he had created for me. But another part, the methodical architect, the one who needs to see the entire structure through to its final collapse to understand all its failings, compelled me to answer. I swiped my finger across the screen. I said nothing. Silence was my new language. Itzel. Itzel, honey, thank God you answered. My father's voice was a wreck, a trembling thread of panic and desperation. In the background, I could hear a chaos of police sirens, shouts, and my mother's hysterical sobbing. Are you seeing this? You have to be seeing it. It's everywhere. I'm seeing something, I said. My voice was a desert, flat, without a single emotion in sight. It's a nightmare, honey. A nightmare. Maite is hurt. She has a bruise on her face. She's in shock. And Gail, that animal, they arrested him. The police are here. And the reporters. Itzel, for the love of God, there are reporters outside the venue. He paused, clearly waiting for a reaction from me. And, I'm on my way, how can I help? I gave him nothing. My silence seemed to disconcert him. You have to come, he pleaded, his tone shifting from panicked narration to the desperate command I also knew so well. You have to come right now. Everything is out of control. Your mother won't stop crying. I don't know what to do. And what am I supposed to do, Dad? I asked, and the question was genuine, loaded with a decade of frustration. Fix it, he shouted, the frustration breaking his voice, revealing his total impotence. You always know what to do. You're the smart one, the one with the cool head. Talk to the venue people, to the lawyers. I don't know. We need you to handle this. The audacity of his request was so monumental it almost made me laugh. They wanted me out of the celebration, but they needed me to clean up the rubble. The story of my life. Besides, his voice dropped to a conspiratorial, shameful whisper. And here came the real reason for the call. The venue manager is demanding immediate payment for the damages. The tables, the glassware. And the unpaid vendors, the mariachi, the flowers, the catering, they want their money now, or they're going to talk to the press, and we, Itzel. With all this, we have no way to pay them. I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a dry, broken sound that came from the depths of my chest. A sound of disbelief. You think this is funny? He shrieked, genuinely offended. Your sister's life is in ruins, her name humiliated across the country, and you think it's funny? No, Dad, I don't think it's funny. I think it's ironic. Terribly ironic. This is no time for your fancy words and your analysis. I need your help. I need money. I'm begging you, Itzel. Save the family one more time. Do it for your sister. Do it for your mother. She's inconsolable. Save the family. The old phrase, the old spell that had always worked. The magic words that turned me into their ATM, their safety net, their eraser of mistakes. But this time, the spell was broken. I walked to the window, watching the city lazily light up at dusk. I felt calm. Terribly, powerfully calm. No, I said. The word was small, almost a whisper, but it cut through the chaos on his side of the line like a surgeon's scalpel. What? What did you say? I didn't hear you. I said no, I repeated, louder this time, each syllable resonating with the force of years of silence. I'm not coming. I'm not fixing anything. And I am certainly not paying for anything. This is your disaster. You wanted a perfect wedding without me, well, now you have a perfect disaster without me. He fell silent, a silence of pure, stunned disbelief. I could hear his agitated, ragged breathing. I was about to hang up, to end the conversation and my role in that family forever. But then I remembered the last piece of the puzzle. The ace up my sleeve. The truth I had unearthed. And I decided it wasn't enough to refuse to help. It was time to show them why. I decided to play my card. Itzel, are you still there? My father's voice was a hoarse, incredulous whisper. The roar of the patriarch was completely extinguished, replaced by the whimper of a man who has lost control of the universe he thought he ruled. I'm still here, Dad, I said. My tone was calm, almost conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. It was the calm that precedes the final collapse of a structure. How can you do this to us, he murmured, resorting to the last and most worn-out weapon in his arsenal, guilt. We're your family. Your sister needs you. After everything we've done for you. Stop right there, I interrupted. My voice was soft, but sharp as steel. Let's talk about what you've done. My sister needed me when her fiancé was cheating on her in a hotel bar, but I decided she was a big girl who could handle her own relationships. My sister needed me when she chose, despite all the signs, to marry a violent man, but I decided to respect her perfect day by staying out of it, just as you asked. And now you need me to pay the bills. It's fascinating how my usefulness to this family always has a dollar sign next to it. It's not about the money, it's about the honor, the humiliation, he lied. His voice trembled, and we both knew it. Of course it's about the money, Dad. It always has been. The nearly $9,000 for Maide's credit card, half of her 25th birthday party, the countless times I've covered your bad spells without asking questions. The money I gave you for the roof repair. Should I go on? I've worked like a dog my whole life to give you everything, he protested, his voice regaining a bit of its false, wounded dignity. I know. And that's precisely why I'm surprised that with all your hard work, you don't have the money to pay for tonight's broken plates. It's almost as if you've had, I don't know, some unforeseen expenses lately. Some very large expenses. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute, a sonic vacuum. I couldn't even hear the chaos in the background anymore. It was the silence of pure panic, the silence of an animal caught in the headlights. I could visualize him perfectly, his face draining of color, a bead of cold sweat running down his temple, his mind racing a mile a minute, trying to figure out how the hell I could know. I decided not to give him time to recover, to invent a new lie. It's funny, Dad, I continued, my voice a glacial whisper. I got to thinking a lot about those unforeseen expenses you mentioned the other day in the kitchen. They were keeping me up at night. And I came up with a brilliant idea to solve your liquidity problem. Why don't you use the $30,000 you just borrowed from the bank? That should surely be enough to pay the mariachi, don't you think? The sound he made was a sort of choke, a gasp for air that wasn't coming, a fish out of water. Or is it? I paused dramatically, savoring the moment, the climax of a decade of silent humiliations, the moment the structure finally gave way, that money was already lost on your debts from that failed tequila company. I delivered the death blow. The final piece of the puzzle I had uncovered just 2 days before, thanks to a discreet call to an old family contact in the town of Tequila. A contact who confirmed for me, in lavish detail, that my father's bad spell wasn't bad luck in business, but a clandestine gambling debt and a failed investment in an artisanal distillery that had left him in ruins. A secret he had kept hidden from everyone, especially my mother and May's personal bank. There was no response, only the sound of his ragged, erratic breathing. He was speechless, trapped, exposed. The great Leandro, the patriarch, the man of honor, the judge of my dramas, reduced to a silent fraudster on the other end of the phone. His house of cards hadn't just fallen, I had set it on fire with the truth. "I have to go, Dad," I said, my voice now tinged with absolute finality, the voice of an architect condemning a building. "I have blueprints to review. Honest structures that are actually worth saving." And without waiting for a reply I knew would never come, without feeling a shred of remorse, I hung up. I stood in the middle of my living room, the phone still in my hand, heavy as a stone. The edifice of my family, that imposing, decorated structure they had propped up with my sacrifices, had collapsed. And I hadn't set the dynamite. I had simply refused to continue being the load-bearing pillar holding up a roof that was about to fall. I let gravity, good old honest gravity, do its job. And the silence that followed the silence in my apartment, the silence in my soul, was the most peaceful and liberating sound I had heard in my entire life. The days following the wedding were a media hell for my family, a hell I observed from the safety of my fortress of silence. The story had all the ingredients for a viral feast: wealth, a violent groom, a humiliated bride, and the juicy mystery of the absent sister. My name soon appeared in the headlines of gossip blogs and on afternoon entertainment shows. The enigmatic older sister who predicted the disaster. Sources close to the family reveal a deep family rift. I became a secondary character in the public tragedy of my own family, and strangely, that gave me peace. Being a character means you're not the real person, you're a construction, a story that others tell. And I had let them tell their story for far too long. My uncle Isidro called me the next day. His voice was somber and apologetic. He didn't call to demand explanations, but to offer his quiet support. The tequila thing was true, wasn't it? I asked him bluntly. I needed the final confirmation. He sighed heavily. I'm afraid so, niece. Your father got in way over his head. Borrowed money from the wrong people. The mortgage on the house was his last, desperate resort to plug the hole. And you knew. I'd suspected for months. He became secretive, always on the phone in a low voice. But he's my older brother. What could I do? I tried to talk to him, but he threw me out. Told me not to meddle in his affairs. I understand, I said, and I truly did. Family loyalty was a slow-acting poison, a chain that often drags you down with the person who is drowning. Then came the inevitable call from my Aunt Lourdes, my mother's sister, the self-proclaimed deputy matriarch. There were no questions, only a torrent of accusations. You're ungrateful, a viper, she shrieked, her voice high with indignation. After everything your parents have done for you. To leave your poor sister at a time like this, humiliated before the whole world. Have you no heart? Auntie, I interrupted with a calm that seemed to disarm her for a second. They broke my heart a long time ago. Now I'm just picking up the pieces so I don't bleed out. Have a nice day. And with that, I blocked her number. It was like pruning a dead, rotten branch from a tree, necessary for the rest of it to heal and get some sun. Maite's messages started arriving on the third day. They were a chaotic mix of hysteria, self-pity, and pleas. Itzel, please, answer me. I need you. I don't know what to do. I can't believe Gail would do this to me in front of everyone. And the one that finally made me react, why didn't you warn me? You always know everything. Why did you let me marry him? The last question, the transfer of blame, made me pause. I replied with a single, concise, and brutally honest message. Because you're 28, not 8. And because nobody warned me about you. She didn't write back. I felt no joy in her suffering. Seeing the photos of her bruised face in the papers turned my stomach. Gail's violence was inexcusable. But I also felt no need to run to her side, to cradle her and tell her everything would be all right. My empathy had a limit, a border they had crossed and trampled long ago. I realized what I felt wasn't gloating, but a deep, liberating relief. The relief of no longer being responsible for anyone's happiness but my own. The relief of seeing the consequences, for once in my life, landing on the right roof. The scandal hadn't destroyed me. It had made me invisible in the best possible way, allowing me to observe from a distance as the pieces of their world, built on lies and appearances, painfully and noisily rearranged themselves. 3 weeks passed. The media noise, like a summer storm, had calmed down, replaced by new celebrity scandals. Life, with its relentless indifference, moved on. I had submerged myself in my work like a diver in deep water, finding solace in the logic, order, and beauty of well-made structures. One afternoon, as I was leaving my office in the heart of the city, I saw her. Maite was sitting on a wrought iron bench across the street, in front of my building. She looked thinner, paler, and was wearing enormous sunglasses, as if she wanted to hide from the world, or as if the afternoon sun was too bright for eyes accustomed to the shade. My first impulse was to turn around, go back into the building, avoid her. The habit of evasion was strong. But the image of her sitting there, alone and huddled, stopped me. She looked like a lost child. With a sigh, I crossed the street. She looked up as my shadow fell over her. She startled a bit, then slowly took off her glasses. She had a small, almost invisible scar near her eyebrow, a permanent reminder of her perfect day. "Hi," she said, her voice a whisper, barely audible over the traffic noise. "Hi," I replied, not knowing what else to say. We stood in silence for a moment, an uncomfortable silence, pregnant with years of resentment and unspoken words. The air was thick with everything we weren't saying. "I'm getting a divorce," she finally said, looking down at her hands, which were nervously fiddling with her purse strap. Gail pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault. He has to take anger management therapy and do 100 hours of community service. Dad paid for a good lawyer so he wouldn't go to jail. He wanted to avoid more scandal. I nodded, not knowing what to say. The irony was so thick you could chew it. "I've been going to therapy," she continued, and this time she looked up and met my eyes directly. There was something new in her gaze, something that wasn't defiance or self-pity. It was clarity. "My therapist says." "Well, she says a lot of things, but the main one is that I've lived in a bubble my whole life, and that you, without realizing it, were the one who made sure that bubble never burst." I stood still, waiting, holding my breath. "I'm sorry, Itzel." The words came out with difficulty, as if she were learning a new language, one that didn't include excuses. "And not just for the wedding. I'm sorry for everything. For the Cancun money, which I know was for your apartment. For not going to your graduation. For taking it for granted every single damn day of my life that you would always be there to clean up my messes." It was the first genuine, unadorned apology I had ever heard from her. There was no, but, at the end, no attempt at manipulation. Just a raw, painful acknowledgement of the truth. "I never understood." Her voice broke, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "I never understood how heavy it must have been for you, to be the adult all the time. Ever since we were kids. I didn't say, 'I forgive you.' It would have been a lie. Forgiveness isn't a switch you can flip on and off. It's a process, like the restoration of an old building. It takes time, patience, and a lot of careful work." Instead, I said something that felt more honest and, in that moment, more valuable. "Thank you for saying that, Maite. It means a lot." She wiped the tear with the back of her hand. "Do you think Do you think we can ever be sisters again? Like before? I looked at her face, and for the first time in years, I didn't see the spoiled, selfish princess. I saw a woman who was beginning to wake up to the harsh, painful reality of her own life. I don't know, I answered with brutal sincerity. I don't know if we can go back to what we were. I think what we were was part of the problem. But maybe we can start to build something new. Something different. Something more real. A small, timid smile formed on her lips. She nodded, as if that answer were enough, as if for the first time she understood that what was real, however imperfect, was better than false perfection. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no tearful, cathartic hug. But it was a beginning. It was the first brick laid on ground that was finally clear of rubble. A new structure, based not on obligation and sacrifice, but on respect and honesty. And for the first time, I felt it was a structure that, with luck and a lot of work, we were both willing to build. A year has passed. The Guadalajara sky still has the same spectacular sunsets, tinged with orange and violet, but I see them with different eyes, from a place of peace that once seemed unreachable. My relationship with Maite is, as I would say in my line of work, a work in progress, slow, careful, sometimes frustrating. We talk once a week, sometimes twice. Sometimes about trivial things like a new Netflix series, sometimes about the deep cracks of our past. She's working part-time at an art gallery in Tlaquepaque and has gone back to college to finish the design degree she left halfway through. She's learning to be responsible for herself, to pay her own bills, to face her own mistakes. And I am slowly learning to trust that she can do it without my safety net. My mother calls me from time to time. Our conversations are short, tense, like walking on a glass floor. She is trying, in her clumsy, passive-aggressive way, to mend things, but she still struggles to accept that family peace cannot be bought with the silence and sacrifice of one of its members. She still doesn't understand that honest structures, as my grandfather taught me, don't hide their cracks. My father. I received a letter from him 6 months ago. It was handwritten on his old office letterhead, a gesture whose significance only I could understand. It was a clumsy confession, full of self-justification and blaming third parties, but between the lines, I could read an apology, an admission of his own cowardice. He enclosed a check for a small, almost symbolic amount. To start paying you back for everything I owe you, he wrote. I haven't cashed the check. It's tucked away in a drawer. Its value isn't monetary. It's proof that even the most damaged structure can show a small sign of wanting to be repaired. I've invested my time and energy in my work, in my friendships, in myself. The restoration of the Porfirian-era mansion in the Colonia Americana won a state architecture award. At the award ceremony, as I held the glass trophy, I saw my uncle Isidro in the audience, applauding with a grin from ear to ear. That night, we toasted with good tequila, the kind you savor, not the kind you use to drown your sorrows. Tonight, I'm on my balcony, watching the city spread out at my feet. The breeze is cool, life is quiet. I no longer feel that constant weight on my shoulders, that invisible responsibility to keep an entire world in orbit. I freed myself from that burden, or rather, they freed me with their last and greatest betrayal. Sometimes, when the night is very quiet, I wonder if I did the right thing. If the coldness of my response in their darkest hour was necessary. If the brutal exposure of the truth was worth the pain it caused. But then I remember the peace I feel now, the lightness in my chest, the freedom to make my own decisions without calculating their impact on my family's fragile ecosystem. And I understand that I had no choice. They forced me to choose between my own mental health and their comfort, between my peace and their facade. For the first time in 34 years of life, I chose myself. I was wrong. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you've ever been in a similar situation, if you've had to set a boundary to protect yourself, tell me your experience in the comments. I'd love to read it. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't the noise of confrontation, but the silent peace that comes after.